Hi everyone, it's Tamara here again with another card making tutorial. This time I'm going to be doing the colouring of the digital scene that we created last time with the Spring Cleaning or Is It stamp set from Wondering Wabbit. I've printed this out on Copic Express it, so we're doing some Copic colouring. So let's get started. So I'm initially going to do my background first. So I've grabbed out my T-ruler and I'm going to create a floor where this basket is sitting on. So I'm going to create a tiled floor. So I'm just going to grab out my lightest marker that I'll be using in my on my floor, which is T1. So I'm just going to line that up just kind of halfway up the basket. Then I'm going to add another line in where I'm going to create one of the floor tiles. And then I'm just going to turn my little T-ruler around and I'm just going to get this angled to the left on this side. So it's kind of coming to the forefront, on straight this side and to the right on this side, so that it looks like it's in the foreground. Now that I've set out where my kind of grout is going to be, I'm just going to bring in the darkest color, the T5, and just start adding some shadow areas in. So obviously the basket will be throwing a bit of shadow. Also at kind of the back of the tiles will be a little bit in shadow as well. Now I will have all the markers up in the top left hand corner, and they will also all be listed in the description box below. So I'm just slowly working out and little flicking motions to bring that color out. Just trying to get a smooth blend. Then we'll bring in the T3, blend out that a little bit further, kind of coming into where our highlight will be, which will be at the front of each of those tiles. And our next color will be our T2. So slowly blending that out, and then we'll bring back in that T1 marker at the end to do our final pass over for these tiles, which is going to be our grout color. So I'm bringing that T1 in, just getting that a nice smooth blend between each of those. Now I do this off camera, but I do come in again with each of those colors again, just doing exactly the same thing. And to just kind of make sure we've got a nice smooth blend, I go over it one more time. But now some of those little grout lines have gotten a little bit blurry, so I'm actually going to bring in my colorless blender and just reinforce those grout lines just by going over where those lines are showing. So you don't need to do too much, and you can see how that grout really brightens up after we do that. That was a technique that I learnt from Amy Young from Sweet November Stamps. Now I'm going to get a little skirting board in, so I'm using my W markers for this. So I've gone in initially with my W1, which will be my lightest color. The darkest shadow at the bottom will be W4. Blend that out with the W2, and then finally blend that back out again with that W1, leaving a bit of lighter color up the very top. Now my wall color is kind of going to be a yellowy color with a bit of shadowing down the bottom. So I'm just going to go in initially just using the side of my marker. So I'm kind of holding my pen quite far back and just using that side of the marker to try and get a nice smooth layer of color down on my first layer using Y000. Again, I will have all those colors listed in the description box below. So I do like to kind of work out from my kind of image out to the side. I just want to make sure that I don't get too much of that pen going into my image, so I find it easier to kind of blend outwards. So now I'm going to blend that out with the YG91, again just going up further up that pen to get a nice kind of smooth transition between these colors. My second lightest color is going to be Y00. So I'm just going to blend that up to a portion up here and then finish back off with that Y000 again. So again, just going over to make sure we get a smooth blend between each of those colors and just up over that top where that sentiment is again. Again, I did reinforce that by going over a second time with those colors. Now I wanted a kind of white looking basket, but we wanted to make sure we put some shadows in. So obviously either side of the basket will be in shadow. under where that lip of that basket top comes out will be in shadow, where I'm about to colour now. And then under those little holes that might throw a little bit of shadowing as well. So I'm using my C1 to blend out that C3, and then bring in our final colour, which is our C00, but still leaving plenty of white space on that basket so that it does read as a white basket. So I'm just blending those two colours out now with that C00, and that's our basket done. Now I wanted to think of a nice mischievous colour for this little guy, so I'm going with my BG markers. So I've just gone in with my lightest marker just to work out where my shadows will be. Then I'll go in with my darkest marker, which is going to be my BG49 for this image. So I'm just popping those shadows in. Then I do realise I missed a little bit of shadow down this side, so I've just popped that in again. Bring in my next marker, which is my BG15. Just slowly working that BG49 out and up into our highlight spot. Then I'm going to be using BG53, just going over that to make sure we get a nice smooth blend between each of those colours. Just flicking up into that white cardstock. And then we'll bring back in that lightest colour again, which will be our BG11, and which will be our highlight colour. So now I'm going to go over and reinforce all those colours again, because we did lose a little bit of that contrast. So I'm bringing that BG49 back in, where that laundry will be throwing a shadow over his body as well. Blend that out with our BG15. Just flicking up into that lighter space. The BG53. So there'll be a little bit of a lightness above his lip and below. And then we'll smooth that out with the BG11 to get a nice smooth blend into our highlight. Now I did want to do a little bit of tip to tip because that wasn't kind of blending very well just by itself. So I'm just using the BG11 to pick up a little bit of the BG53 to ensure a nice smooth blend, and you can see how well that blends that out. And I did forget that little cute tail that he has, so I'm just going to use those same colours again. But this, in the small space, I only needed to do this once and it blended out really nicely. So now we're going to do some like little blue shirts and sheets that are in this basket that he's sitting in. So I'm going to pop in my darkest colour to throw in the shadows of obviously where the basket will be throwing shadows. Also where each of those items are over another item, they'll be throwing shadows. And then we'll come in with our lightest marker for our highlight, which will be our B91. Now I wasn't really happy with the shadowing, so I'm going in with my B95 again to see if I can reinforce those shadows. And eventually I do come in with the C3 to actually reinforce those shadows, because it just wasn't quite giving me the highlights that I wanted. But obviously it is a material, so obviously it won't be a really shiny highlight, but I do want that kind of contrast of colour between each of those. So this is where I bring in that C3, just kind of reinforce that shadow area. Just a little bit, and I didn't need to blend it out because I just wanted to make sure that that stayed focal. Now I'm wanting to do some white socks, so obviously as I always do, I'm just using a bit of my C markers, but still leaving a lot of white space to make sure it looks like a white sock. So my darkest colour was my C3, I blended that out with my C1, and now blending that out again with the C00 marker on each of those socks. And I just wanted to make sure there was a smooth blend up into that white cardstock, so I used my colourless blender. Now I wanted a nice contrasting colour against his kind of bluey green, so I thought oranges would look really nice, so a red orange I'm using. So I went in with my E8, which is kind of like a brown marker, but it does have a lot of orange tone to it. So pop that in there, or reddy kind of browned colour. Blended that out with the YR07, now the YR04, just blending up to that white highlight spot. Just slowly blending that out and using our final colour, my YR02, as our highlight. I only need a little bit on those. Now for his teeth, I wanted to make sure that they were in shadow as well as the kind of dust that he's flinging in the air. So I'm just putting a small amount of that C3 down the bottom to give that a little bit of dimension. Blend that out with our C1, just slowly flicking that up into that white cardstock or down into that white cardstock on his teeth, just leaving a little bit of white cardstock at the base of those teeth after I blend it out with the C00. Now we'll put some color on his tongue. I want a nice kind of bright red tongue. So I'm going in with my R24, blend that out with my R22, and go back over again with our R21 to blend that out. So I've cut and scored a blue card base to match in with the color of our little guy, our little critter. So I'm just going to line that up. I've put some glue on the back of our panel, give that a press down, and I'll just set that under a book to dry to make sure that dries nice and flat. And this is the finished card for this tutorial. I just loved creating up this scene. I think it's so cute that he's in the basket, making sure he's got that little sock on his head, flicking up the dust or little like motes that come in with your washing, just having an absolute ball in the laundry doing this. I hope you've enjoyed this card making tutorial, and I hope this kind of now seeing this colored up after we created it on the computer really helps you work out some scenes that you want to do for yourself. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.